Are you interested in doing ultra macro photography? We are going to have a look at the new Zhongyi 85mm f2.8 ultra macro lens. This is a lens that allows you to do from 1x magnification all the way up to 5x magnification, so you can see things that you have never seen before even with a normal macro lens. Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard Wong here. Today we are going to have a look at the new Zhongyi 85mm f2.8 ultra macro lens. This is a macro lens that allows you to go from 1x magnification all the way to 5x magnification. If you have never heard of the name Zhongyi before, this is actually the same company that created the Mitakon lenses that you probably had heard of. For example, the Mitakon 50mm f0.95 Speedmaster lens. But it seems like the company is phasing out the Mitakon brand name and switching to use just the Zhongyi brand name, because on the lens and also on all the packaging I didn't see any mention of the Mitakon lens. So I guess from now on the company will switch to only use Zhongyi as their brand name. Personally, I like the name Zhongyi more than Mitakon because Zhongyi is a very typical Chinese name, so that reminds me that this is a lens from a Chinese optics manufacturer. So okay, enough off topic stuff, let's come back and talk about the lens. As I just mentioned before, this lens can do macro photography from 1x magnification all the way to 5x magnification, and this lens also has some pretty unique feature that make it a very interesting lens, which I will talk about very soon in this review. This lens is available on pretty much all the popular lens mount in the market: Nikon F, Canon EF, Sony A, Sony E, Pentax K, Micro Four Third, Fuji X, and also EOS M. The only mount that is missing from the list is the L mount, but because this lens is a purely mechanical lens with no electronic contact, so if you are shooting with L mount camera, you can just pretty much grab a version with another lens mount and then use adapter and attach to your L mount camera. Before that, let me just show you a quick example to show you what the photo look like when I take photo at 1x magnification and also 5x magnification. So here are some photos I took of a $20 New Zealand note, and this is the photo I shot at 1x magnification. And now this is a photo I shot at 5x magnification. There is quite a big difference between 1x and 5x magnification. If you are looking at buying a macro lens that can also be used for normal photography, for example, use it to shoot portrait, then this Zhongyi 85mm ultra macro lens is not suitable for you. Anything that is further than 20-something centimeter away from the front element of the lens cannot be focused by this lens, so you can only use this lens to do macro photography. But on the other hand, if you already got quite a few lenses in your camera bag and you are especially looking for a lens to do macro photography, then you really should check out this lens, because there are not too many lenses in the market that can go up to 5x magnification. Okay, now let's have a look at the build quality of the lens. Just like the other Zhongyi or Mitakon lenses, this lens has a very solid metal construction. Pretty much the whole lens is made of metal. As I mentioned before, this is a pure mechanical lens, so there is no electronic contact, there's no autofocus, and there's no other fancy electronic features. You have the aperture ring at the top of the lens, so this is a declicked aperture ring. Normally I don't like declicked ring, but for a macro lens, I don't really mind that much, because with the macro lens, normally you would slow down and slowly adjust all the settings, so I don't really mind it too much. And below that you have the focus ring, which you can also call it a magnification ring, because on there you can see at the different setting it tells you what is the magnification that you are setting to. And surprisingly, the travel of this ring is quite small. There's only like 90 degrees from one end to the other end. The focus ring is quite large and easy to use, but I won't call it buttery smooth, and I wish it is slightly smoother. Since the lens doesn't have any electronic contact and also doesn't have any auto aperture feature, so when you are changing the aperture value, you would see that the aperture would stop down immediately. If you are shooting with a DSLR, what it means is that when you are reducing the aperture, the viewfinder will get dimmer and dimmer. And also as you are increasing the magnification, the effective aperture will also become smaller. So together, that would just make the viewfinder become quite dim when you are using it on a DSLR. That means you probably need some bright constant light source to help you bright up the scene so that you can see the scene clearly and also allow you to focus accurately. And fortunately, Zhongyi actually included a LED ring light in the box. My understanding is that this is a freebie that comes with the box, at least with the initial shipment. So you can easily just screw it onto the front of the lens. There is a USB connector here, so you can just plug in any USB power source and use it to power the light. The light is actually pretty bright and it does provide a very nice and even lighting on the subject that you are shooting. However, because most of the time you would have to stop down the lens quite a bit when you are taking macro photo, and because of the effective aperture will reduce as you increase the magnification. That means if you are mainly relying on using this light to light up your scene when you are taking macro photo, your shutter speed will have to drop to quite slow. For example, when I shot this 5x magnification using purely just this light as the light source, I set the camera to base ISO 100 and the aperture is f11. I have to set the shutter speed to 1 second to get correct exposure. While this is definitely very doable, you really have to make sure you have a very solid tripod and also the ground is not shaking, because any tiny amount of camera vibration would easily result in a blurry output photo. So while it definitely cannot replace a proper macro flashlight setup, it is still quite good if you have a solid tripod or you want to use it to light up your scene to allow you to focus correctly. I mentioned the term effective aperture a few times just before, and what it actually means is, for a lens like this, while the actual maximum aperture is always f2.8, but as you change the focus distance or as you change the magnification ratio, the amount of light that can travel through the lens would actually decreases, or in other words, the effective aperture would reduce as you are increasing the magnification. I did some quick tests to see how the light transmission or the effective aperture will be like when I'm changing through different magnification on this lens. So first I compared the Zhongyi at 1000 magnification at the maximum aperture f2.8 with my Tamron macro lens also set to f2.8, but the Tamron lens I set to infinity focus, which allowed the maximum amount of light to go through the lens. So comparing the two photos I shot at the same aperture, I noticed that the photo shot on the Zhongyi at 1x magnification is about 3 stops darker than photo from the Tamron at infinity focus. So that means the effective aperture of this lens at 1x magnification is pretty much around f8. And then I changed to 5x magnification and I noticed that it loses another 2 stops of light at 5x magnification. So that means the effective aperture at 5x magnification is around f16. But one thing I want to emphasize is that this is not something that is unique to this Zhongyi ultra macro lens. In fact, if you compare it with the Canon MP-E 65mm ultra macro lens, which is also a 1 to 5 time ultra macro lens, the Canon at 5x magnification, the effective aperture is exactly the same at f16. However, I'm a little bit surprised that at 1x magnification, this lens loses 3 stops of light, because typically at 1x magnification, most macro lens will lose slightly over 2 stops of light. The lens also comes with a removable tripod mount. It's completely made of metal. It is very solid and it also is Aka Swiss compatible. When I first received the lens and have it mounted on a tripod using this tripod mount, initially I do notice there's a little bit of play when I was trying to adjust the camera. It is a very tiny amount of play that normally I probably wouldn't notice, but because it is a macro lens and ultra macro lens, so any tiny amount of play you would notice it when you're looking through the viewfinder. So I took it off the lens again and have a look. What I found is that the two screw at the bottom of this tripod mount was slightly loose, maybe because I'm using a pre-production sample, so the screw was not completely tightened up. But if you also bought this lens and notice there's a bit of play, I would highly recommend you to check these two screws and just try to tighten it up a little bit. Anyway, once I have tightened up those two screws at the bottom of the tripod mount, the tripod mount itself become very solid with virtually no play at all. One thing I really like about this Zhongyi lens is minimum working distance is very long, a lot longer than the other macro lens in the market. And if you ask what is minimum working distance, is it the same as minimum focus distance? They are not exactly the same thing. Minimum focus distance is the distance from the sensor to the subject that you are shooting, while minimum working distance is the distance from the front of the lens to your subject. So in my opinion, minimum working distance is a lot more important than minimum focus distance, because some lenses can be quite long. So even if you may have a very long minimum focus distance, if your lens is really long, the actual working distance that you have between the front of the lens and your subject could be still very tiny. But with this Zhongyi 85mm ultra macro lens, when you are shooting at 1x magnification, the minimum working distance is around 25 centimeter from, which is the distance from the front of the lens to the subject. And if you are shooting at 5x magnification, the minimum working distance is still 9 centimeter. I believe this is the longest minimum working distance for a similar macro lens in the market. Just for a quick comparison, with the Canon MP-E 65, at 1x magnification, the minimum working distance is about 10 centimeter, which is less than half of that compared to the Zhongyi. And at 5x magnification, the minimum working distance with the Canon is only 4 centimeter, which again is half of that of this Zhongyi lens. So in my opinion, just this really long minimal working distance alone make this lens a very attractive option for anyone who want to do macro photography. Okay, now let's have a look at the image quality and let's have a look at the image sharpness first. Let's have a look at the image sharpness at 1x magnification. At the maximum aperture f2.8, the image is definitely a little bit soft. The sharpness improved quite a lot when I stop down to f4, and it becomes sharpest at around f8. And now if you look at the image sharpness at 5x magnification, at the maximum aperture f2.8, it is soft and you can also see a little bit of glow in some high contrast area. Stop down to f4, the image sharpness will improve a little bit. When I stop down to f8, it seems to give me the sharpest result. And if I continue to stop down, the image become a bit softer, probably because of diffraction. Chromatic aberration is very well controlled. Look at these two photos that are shot at 1x and 5x magnification. There is virtually no chromatic aberration at all. At maximum aperture, the bokeh is quite round and smooth, but there is a little bit of color halo at the edge of the bokeh. When I start to stop down the lens, the bokeh would turn into a polygon shape, but because of the 9 curved aperture brake, the outline of the bokeh still remain relatively round even if I stop all the way down to f32. So here you go, this is my review of this Zhongyi 85mm ultra macro lens. There are definitely a couple of things that I wish could be improved. For example, the manual focus ring, I wish it could be a little bit smoother, and the LED light, while it is already quite bright, but I wish it could be even brighter. But consider the price of this lens is only half of that of the Canon MP-65, and also the minimal working distance is more than double that of the Canon, which gives you a huge advantage when you are taking macro photo. If you are thinking of getting an ultra macro lens, I think this Zhongyi is definitely a very attractive option. To be honest, ultra macro photography is not really an easy thing to do. I was having a hard time trying to get some really nice and sharp image when I was shooting with this lens at 5x magnification, even though I myself actually have quite a bit of macro photography experience. It's not a problem of this lens, just to be clear. It's just a nature of ultra macro photography. You just need to have everything very precisely. So because any tiny amount of movement would either cause the photo to be out of focus, or the vibration would cause the output photo to be really blurry. So yeah, it's not an easy thing to get a very sharp photo. But having said that, even if you are a complete beginner to macro photography, I would still recommend you to check out this lens, because this lens you can choose from 1x to 5x magnification. So if you are not quite ready to go to 5x magnification, you can always just start from the easier 1x macro photography and just start enjoying macro photography from 1x magnification. And then later on, as your skills improve, then you can try 2x, 3x, 4x, and 5x macro photography without having to buy another lens. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any question about this lens, please feel free to just drop a comment in the comment field below. Thanks again for watching this video, and I will see you in my next video.